first time I found him, he was barely breathing, a tangle of matted fur and exposed ribs curled against the edge of my property, where the pines began to swallow the cleared land. Rain had hammered down for 3 straight days, turning the soil into a wet, squelching carpet under my worn boots as I approached. Steam rose from his body into the cold dawn, the only sign he was still alive. I should have called animal control. That's what anyone else in Blackwater Valley would have done. But something in the way he lay there, broken and exposed, tugged at a memory of another rainy day long ago when no one had stopped for me. "It's okay," I whispered, voice soft, almost lost beneath the patter of rain on the needles above. "I won't hurt you," I murmured again, and his head lifted slightly. I froze. 2 milky white eyes stared blankly at me, blind eyes yet somehow piercing straight into my chest. A low growl rumbled from his throat, more fear than threat. I recognized that sound. I'd made it myself every time someone tried to get close after Daniel died. Naya would have called it a sign. She always said animals chose us, not the other way around. The silver locket she'd left me rested heavy around my neck. Inside a scrap of her final words, "Kindness to the broken heals the breaker." I'd never understood them fully until now. "You can't stay here," I said, inching closer, "but I can't let you die." When I coaxed him onto the tarp I dragged from the shed, he felt far lighter than I expected, too thin for his size. Whatever had done this to him, illness, injury, or cruelty, he was starved and fragile. His blindness looked fresh. The scars around his eyes hadn't healed. Getting him back to my cabin was slow, careful work. Each time the tarp snagged on rough ground, he whined softly. I whispered promises he couldn't understand, but maybe it wasn't the words. They were in the tone, the assurance that the world held more than pain. The cabin had been my refuge for nearly 2 years. After leaving the city and its shadows behind, I'd poured myself into restoring the old family property. Nestled at the foot of the mountains, miles from neighbors, it was the solitude I'd craved. No prying eyes, no murmured condolences, no one watching me piece myself back together. And now I was dragging a wild animal into my private world. Maybe madness. But as I cleared space in the mudroom and lined it with old blankets, a spark long dormant stirred inside me. Purpose. "This is temporary," I told him, lifting him gently onto his new bed. "Just until you're strong enough to go home." His blind eyes followed me as I gathered water, antiseptic, and first aid supplies. When I leaned in to clean his wounds, his lips curled, teeth bared. I froze. I understood. "Trust must be earned," I said softly. "I'll wait." I sat cross-legged a few feet away, letting him acclimate to my presence. Eventually he lowered his head to his paws, tension still coiled in his body. That night I slept on the sofa rather than upstairs, unwilling to leave him alone in this strange place. Through the darkness I heard him shift claws, scraping the floor as he mapped his new world. Just before dawn, I woke to silence. Shallow breaths. "Please don't die," I whispered into the dim pre-dawn gloom. "Not here. Not under my watch." It wasn't just him. It was me too, proving I could nurture even after failing with Daniel. The first week was touch and go. I coaxed him to drink electrolytes, then nibbled tiny pieces of cooked meat from a distance. I never touched him directly, respecting his boundary. Each day I spoke aloud about trivial things, the weather, birds, a book I was reading. Not because he understood, but because my own voice had been too quiet for too long. By the second week, he could stand on shaky legs, exploring the mudroom, with careful steps, nose alert. I expanded his territory to the kitchen and living room, removing anything fragile. His movements grew confident, his memory of the layout swift. It was during the third week I noticed the first real change. Sitting on the floor, near him, reading aloud, I glanced up and saw it. The cloudy white of his eyes gave way to a warm, amber flickering, at their centers glowing softly in the firelight. "Your eyes," I breathed, forgetting for a moment that he couldn't understand me. They were changing. His head lifted when I spoke, ears forward, alert in a way I hadn't seen since the moment I dragged him from the trees. For the first time, a doubt flickered in my chest. Maybe his blindness wasn't just injury. Maybe it was something stranger. Something I'd only ever seen whispered in old mountain folklore and late-night campfire tales. But I shoved the thought away. Solitude in the mountains was clearly messing with my logic. Still, each day the transformation continued, that clouded film peeling back, revealing a deep gold glow beneath. And sometimes when I stepped into a room, it felt like he followed my movements before I made a single sound. Impossible, wasn't it? I began taking him outside a rope lead, knotted in my hand. At first he stayed right against my leg, wary of the open world and the uneven ground. But confidence came creeping back. He lifted his face to the wind like he remembered life before the dark scents paths, wild freedom. Those moments became the brightest part of my days, watching him rediscover the earth, like a soul returning to its body. Then on the eve of week 4, a violent storm rolled over Blackwater Valley. Thunder cracked so fiercely the cabin shook. Lightning ripped open the sky. He paced anxiously, whining each time the heavens roared. Without thinking, I sank to the floor and opened my arms. "Come here," I murmured. "You're safe." To my astonishment, he padded over and settled beside me, not quite touching, but close enough that the heat of him soaked into my skin. We stayed like that for hours, two battered creatures weathering the storm together, holding on to a quiet neither of us had known in too long. I must have drifted. When I woke, soft morning light glowed through the windows. The world outside was washed clean and still, the hush after nature's wrath. I stretched and froze. His head rested in my lap, heavy and warm, as if somewhere in the night the last wall between us finally cracked. With shaking hands, I touched him, the coarse fur between his ears. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into my palm. Tears hit my throat before I even realized they'd risen. Such a simple act, trust. Yet it shattered something I'd kept ironclad since Cyrus' funeral. "Thank you," breathed, unsure if I spoke to him, or fate, or Naya's memory. Later, as sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, I poured coffee and froze at a strange sound. Not a whine, not a growl. Something in between. Instinct prickled every hair on my neck. I turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, body still, posture regal. But his eyes, those eyes. Where blindness once lived, now. Two fierce golden irises burned with uncanny awareness. Not the stare of a mere wolf, but something ancient knowing, sharp as a blade drawn in silence. The air thickened. Pressure built as if another storm had erupted inside my cabin. He stepped forward, then again, smooth, controlled, purpose carved in every movement. He stopped inches away, sat and locked onto my gaze. 4 weeks I have waited, he said, his voice deep rough, an echo of man layered over wolf, human words forming on a mouth that should not speak them. 4 weeks to mend what was broken, to remember what was lost. Now I see you truly. The mug slipped from my fingers. Ceramic exploded across the floor. You are my fated mate, he continued, gold eyes unwavering. The one I searched for across time. My world shattered like that mug. I stumbled backward until my spine hit the counterpulse, roaring breath scattered. The room tilted. This isn't real, I whispered, voice shaking. I'm asleep. I'm dreaming. I'm still on the floor after the storm. He know, not just a wolf stayed utterly still, watching, patient, terrifying in his calm. Your fear burns sharp, he rumbled. I do not wish to harm you. From the moment you found me, even blind, I knew who you were. A laugh burst out, wild, sharp-edged. Known me. I don't even know who you are, or what you are. My name is Kale, he answered as though telling me the weather. Your kind would call me a shifter. My true form walks on 2 legs. I was trapped in this one by those who fear what they cannot understand. My head shook, blonde hair falling in a trembling curtain over my face. I shoved it back with a trembling hand. Shifters aren't real, I whispered. They're just stories, legends. Says the woman who nursed a blind wolf for a month, he countered. And I could swear there was a faint edge of amusement in his voice. Naya knew the truth. The locket you wear, she understood the old laws. My hand flew to the silver pendant at my throat. How could he know about Naya, about her final gift? I'd never spoken of it while he was near. Had I? What do you mean, fated mate? I forced out, clinging to the one phrase that terrified me most. I'm not anyone's mate. I just found an injured animal. Kyle tilted his head, a gesture so wolf-like it rattled me. For a heartbeat, I wondered if I'd finally snapped from isolation and grief, if this was some elaborate trick of my mind. Among my kind, there's a bond deeper than human love, he said. A soul recognition rare. I've waited over 2 centuries to feel it. 2 centuries. My voice wobbled. We age differently, he replied like it was nothing. When I was attacked and blinded, I was tracking a scent calling to me for months. Yours. I didn't understand then. The attack trapped me in wolf form. And then you found me. My knees gave out and I slid to the floor, not caring about broken ceramic and cooling coffee. This couldn't be real, and yet, hadn't there been moments these past weeks when something unexplainable tugged between us, his impossible recovery, the comfort I found near him, as if my soul recognized something before my mind did? Let's pretend I believe any of this, I breathed. What do you want from me? For now, nothing, Kale said gently. You were not supposed to learn like this. A bond must be accepted freely, not forced. Then why tell me at all? Why not leave once you healed? My voice broke and shame burned hot. Why did the idea of him leaving hurt? Because the ones who maimed me are still hunting, he replied, voice low and dangerous. And now that you helped me, your scent has mingled with mine. They can track you too. A cold shiver sliced down my spine. Hunters who? There are humans who know about us. They see us as monsters' trophies, his ears lowered, muscles tightening. Their leader Varric has hunted my pack for generations. His family built their legacy on our blood. The name meant nothing to me, but the meaning was clear enough. Danger was already here. My sanctuary deep in the mountains suddenly felt like a spotlighted stage. So what now? I asked, surprised by my own steady tone. Kyle's gaze softened. Now I protect you while my power returns. And when I'm strong enough, if you're willing, I take you to my pack. They'll keep you safe until Varric and his hunters are dealt with. Your pack. My voice cracked. There are more like you. Not exactly like me. Each shifter is different, but yes. We share the dual soul. His voice held quiet pride. They've searched for me since I vanished. I closed my eyes. I came here to escape a world that had already ripped me open once. Cyrus' death hollowed me out, left me stumbling through existence. Nursing Kyle back when I thought he was just a broken wolf had been the first time I felt alive again. And now this new reality, wild and impossible, threatened to swallow me whole. I need time, I whispered. You shall have it, he promised. But not much. My strength grows each day. Soon I'll walk in human form again, and when I do, Varric's hunters will sense the power shift. They always do. A countdown. My quiet life ticking toward collision with something ancient and dangerous. Fear should have drowned me, yet beneath it sparked something else. Curiosity. Pull. Fate. Can you... My throat tightened. Can you show me your human form? Kale shook his massive head. Not yet. Shifting takes energy, I've nearly restored. But soon. Days at most. Strangely, disappointment stung, absurd and immediate. Yesterday, I was feeding a blind wolf scraps. Now I was wishing to see the man inside the beast. I pushed to my feet, stepping around shattered ceramic. I need to clean this. And then I need to think. Alone. Of course, he said, stepping back to give me space. I'll be here when you're ready. The domestic normalcy in his tone, like we were roommates, arguing about dishes instead of supernatural destiny and men who hunted shifters, almost made me laugh. Instead, I swept broken pieces into a dustpan, clinging to the simple task like a lifeline. A small ordinary act in a world that had just split open beneath my feet. Throughout the day, I moved through the cabin, Mara busying herself with mundane tasks, Kyle keeping a respectful distance, never disappearing from view. I caught him glancing at me from the corner of his eyes, those golden irises holding depths I hadn't noticed before, or maybe had always been there, waiting for me to see. As evening draped the valley in shadow, I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and carried a glass of wine to the porch. The air had turned crisp, biting at my flushed skin, and I welcomed it. Soft padding footsteps behind me, paws on wood, announced his presence. Without turning, I asked, "How many others are there, like you? I mean." "Fewer than there once were," Cale replied, settling beside my rocking chair. 18 in my pack, one of the larger ones left, and they all shift between human and wolf. Yes. Some have stronger control than others. The younger ones struggle with full moons. The elders can shift at will, no matter the cycle. I sipped my wine slowly, gathering courage. And this mate bond. How does it work? Do all of your kind have one? No, he said softly. Reverence in his voice. Most never find their true mate. Bonds of companionship, pack loyalty, yes. But the deep recognition I felt with you, it's rare. Legendary even. But how can I be your mate, I pressed. I'm not like you. I'm human. The bond doesn't follow species lines, Kyle explained. It predates our kinds. A magic older than you or I, from a time when the boundaries were thinner. Bloodlines, I choked on my wine. You mean lineage? Not in the sense you think, he said quickly. The bond is foremost spiritual. The rest, your choice always. I swallowed hard and changed the subject. The hunters. How do they track your kind? Kyle's muscles tensed, his body radiating alertness. A mix of old magic and modern tools, blood spells to detect shifters, thermal imaging to track our heat signatures. Sometimes they use captured shifters to find the rest. My chest iced. They captured you. They tried. He growled deep in his chest. Silver-tipped weapons to weaken me, a ritual to blind me, temporarily to keep me from returning to my pack. They underestimated my resilience. I escaped before they could trap me. And then I found you, I whispered, remembering that drenched morning. You were so weak. Cale admitted. I thought you might die. I likely would have without your care. The blindness was the worst, he continued. A spell meant to disorient and incapacitate, but they didn't account for you. For me, I asked. Cale's voice softened. The touch of a fated mate can heal wounds, fatal to my kind. Every time you came near, spoke to me, tended me, your presence countered their magic without you knowing it. I froze. So I hadn't found him by accident. No accidents in this world, Kyle said. Only patterns we haven't recognized. The words mirrored something Naya had once told me, and a chill ran through me, unrelated to the evening air. Night had fully fallen. Crickets thrummed in the forest, and distant howls carried new weight. Will you answer them if I ask? I whispered. Will your voice call through the night? To others, Cale's gaze never wavered. When I shift back, I will remember every moment we've shared. The wolf is not separate from the man. Awareness, feelings, they remain constant regardless of form. Feelings. The word hung between us, heavy with implication too large to fully confront. It's late, I finally said, rising from my chair. And we both have much to prepare for. Kyle added, golden eyes gleaming in the darkness, luminous and unblinking. Rest. I'll keep watch tonight. The casual promise of protection should not have brought me comfort, yet it did. Still, as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, leaving Kyle downstairs for the first time since his revelation, I felt a strange security in knowing he guarded the cabin. My final thought before sleep was a question I didn't dare voice aloud. Had I saved him, or had he in some way rescued me from the half-life I'd lived since Cyrus's death? Dawn arrived with startling brilliance, sunlight stabbing through my window, almost painfully bright. I stretched beneath the covers, briefly, disoriented by the depth of my sleep. No nightmares, no cold sweat with Cyrus' name on my lips. Just solid, uninterrupted rest for the first time in years. Memory of yesterday's impossible truths hit me in full. Kyle, the shifter, my alleged fated mate, stress-induced hallucination. The heavy sound of something falling downstairs answered the question before I could form it. I threw off the blankets, heart hammering. Kale! I called, sprinting toward the stairs. What's happening? A strangled sound met me, half growl, half human cry, and my pulse spiked. At the bottom step, he was in the living room, body twisted in apparent agony, golden eyes burning with an internal fire that almost hurt to look at. Stay back, he warned, voice deeper, rougher than ever. It's happening. The shift. Too soon. I froze, unable to tear my gaze from the transformation unfolding before me. Kyle's body rippled, bones visibly rearranging beneath his fur. His spine elongated with sickening cracks that made my stomach turn. Yet something primal rooted me to the spot. I whispered, voice tiny over his labored breathing. What can I do? He could not answer, lost in the throes of change. Front paws, stretched fingers, lengthening where pads had been moments before. Fur thinned in patches, revealing pale skin beneath. I pressed my hand to my mouth, torn between fascination and instinct, to flee from this raw primal metamorphosis. The process stretched both into eternity and vanished in seconds. When it stilled, a naked man lay curled on my living room floor, sweat gleaming, muscles trembling from newly formed strength. Dark hair fell across a face partially hidden against the hardwood. Heartbeats passed in silence before he slowly pushed into a sitting position, revealing his face fully. He was breathtaking beauty that stole the breath. Features too perfect for merely human high cheekbones. Strong jaw dusted with stubble, lips curved in subtle repose. Golden eyes, the same as before, now framed a sculpted face. Though he appeared 30-something shifter, longevity suggested he could be centuries older. I realized I'd been staring and turned my gaze, cheeks burning. I'll get you some clothes. I rushed upstairs, rifling through boxes in the spare room until I found some of Cyrus's belongings I hadn't yet parted with. The expected ache of handling them was muted, only a ghost of grief. I grabbed sweatpants and a t-shirt that might fit Kyle's broader frame and returned downstairs, eyes trained on the floor. Here, I said, offering them, without meeting him directly. Thank you, he said, voice fully human now, carrying that same deep resonance. Fabric rustled as he dressed. You can look now, he said. I lifted my eyes and found him standing, sweatpants on, t-shirt still in one hand. The sight of his bare torso, marked with long, claw-like scars across his ribs, sent an unexpected heat through me. Sorry, he murmured, noting my expression. The shift is never painless. This one was worse. My body... Why now? You said days. He tugged the shirt over his head, wincing slightly. I felt them, the hunters. Closer than I'd realized, tracking faster than expected. Fear shot through me, sharp and cold. Here, they're coming here, not immediately. But soon, he said, running a hand through his dark hair. Within a day, maybe two. The gesture felt oddly vulnerable. The shift, I realized, was more than transformation. It was instinct. Kyle's body, bracing for threat, even as it struggled with its new form. I sank onto the sofa, trying to process the impossible. Kyle remained standing, posture stiff, betraying unease in this human shell. "Is it difficult?" I asked, voice small. Being human again after so long as a wolf, he flexed his fingers, brow furrowing slightly. "Adjustment is required. Sensations differ, sharper in some ways, dulled in others." He moved cautiously across the room, each step smoother than the last, as he reacquainted himself with bipedal motion. There was something intimate about watching this, like seeing someone relearn to walk after injury. "You should eat," I said, remembering my caretaker role. "The shift must burn tremendous energy." "It does," he agreed, following me to the kitchen. "More than you might imagine," I muttered while preparing a substantial breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, hyper-aware of him sitting at the table, a mythical being rendered domestic. The absurdity was almost comforting. "How long have you lived alone here?" he asked, breaking the silence. I cracked eggs into a bowl, focusing. "Almost 2 years. After Cyrus died, I couldn't stay in the city. Everything reminded me of him." "I'm sorry for your loss," Cale said simply, sincerity pulling at my chest. "Cancer," I offered quietly. "Quick," he murmured. 4 months from diagnosis to the end." "You'd barely started planning." I hadn't spoken of Cyrus in months. Yet here I was, sharing grief with a stranger who was no longer a stranger. "Grief reshapes us," Cowell observed, quietly noting the weight it carries. "I've lived long enough to lose many I cared for." I turned, struck by the contrast, ancient sorrow behind eyes that looked impossibly youthful. "How old are you by human counting?" 243 years, he replied. "Young for my kind. Our alpha nears 500. Eggs nearly slipped from my hands." 500. How is that possible? The dual nature extends lifespan, he explained. The wolf heals what would kill the human. The human mind preserves what instinct would lose. He accepted the plate I offered. "Though we can die, through violence, or choice when centuries weigh too heavy." I sat, appetite diminished, mind spinning. "And fated mates, do they live as long?" Kyle hesitated. "Sometimes. The bond can extend human lifespan, though never fully to shifter years. Rare but possible. Even if I accepted this bond, I would age die while he endured." The thought sent a cold ache through me. Why me? "What makes a fated mate?" I pressed. "Is there something special about me?" He set down his fork, considering. "Old stories speak of complementary souls, natures that balance each other perfectly. Beyond that, mysteries even to us. I only know from the moment you approached in the rain, something in me recognized you." He reached across the table, hesitation in every movement, fingers stopping just shy of mine. I flinched, the impossibility of it all pressing in. "I don't expect you to accept this." "Not yet," he murmured. I drew back slightly, not ready for the weight of contact. "These hunters," I asked, shifting the subject. "Tell me more. What exactly are we facing?" Kyle inclined his head, calm. "Varric comes from a line of hunters stretching generations. They see shifters as abominations. Unnatural creatures that upset the divine order. But there's more than religious zeal behind it. They harvest parts from our bodies, teeth, claws, hearts, believing these hold power. And sometimes they're right." My stomach twisted at the casual description. "That's horrific." "The natural world has always been red in tooth and claw," Kyle said, voice flat, emotionless. "Humans have just developed more elaborate excuses for predation," he added. The philosophical detachment in his tone reminded me sharply of his inhuman perspective. Centuries spent observing mankind refine cruelty into ever more complex forms. "So what's our plan?" I asked, steering us back to the present. "You said taking me to your pack." "Yes. Safest option," he replied. My territory lies 40 miles north, deep in mountains where humans seldom tread. My people can protect you while we deal with Varek. And after I pressed, afraid of the answer. I couldn't quite bring myself to ask if he meant to kill them. Kael's golden eyes held mine steadily. That depends entirely on you. The mate bond gives possibility, not obligation. You can return to your life here if you choose. I should have felt relief, a promise of eventual normalcy, a return to solitude. Instead, hollow emptiness crept in. We should leave today, he said, rising from the table. Pack only what you cannot live without. We'll travel on foot, he continued, through the forest. Harder for them to spot us. 40 miles, I stared, incredulous. A small smile tugged at his lips. For humans, yes, but in wolf form I can carry you much of the way. Leave within the hour, and we reach my territory by nightfall tomorrow. The casual assertion of his abilities reminded me again how little I truly understood him, what he was capable of. I'd seen him shift, fed him at my table, yet he remained unknowable. I need to think, I muttered, overwhelmed, gesturing vaguely toward upstairs. Kael nodded, understanding. Take the time you need. I'll keep watch. On autopilot, I packed essentials into a backpack, mind racing. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry had been whether the wolf's eyesight would fully recover. Now I was preparing to flee from hunters with a man who had lived weeks as an animal in my care. My fingers brushed Naya's silver locket as I grabbed a sweater. Had she known? All those stories of forest spirits and old magic. Charming nonsense, or preparation. I'd failed to recognize downstairs, backpacks slung. Kael stood at the window, alert. The sleeves of Daniel's t-shirt rolled to his elbows, forearms lean taut with muscle. He turned, golden eyes assessing. Ready? He asked simply. I nodded, though ready felt impossible. Leaving the cabin, my sanctuary, the space where I'd begun to heal, felt like abandoning the last remnant of my former life. We can return, Kael said softly, reading my hesitation. When it's safe, I whispered, voice tight. Locking the door, I slipped the key into my pocket, a gesture of faith that a return was possible. Kael led us toward the northern tree line. His movement was fluid, confident, far more at ease in human form than earlier. The proximity to the wild seemed to restore something essential in him. I'll need to shift again soon, he said as we moved through the thickening underbrush. Faster travel, better threat tracking. Does it hurt? Every time I asked, anxious. Less when voluntary, he said softly. This morning's shift was unusually painful. We walked in silence, the forest closing around us. Eventually he stopped in a small clearing, turning to face me. This is far enough from any trails, he said. I should change now. I nodded, unsure where to look, unsure what to do. Even after witnessing his transformation once, the idea of seeing it again made my chest tighten now that Kael was fully conscious and aware of me. You might want to turn around, he suggested, a hint of amusement threading his tone. I felt my cheeks heat as I quickly spun my back. The clothes won't survive, he added. Fabric rustled behind me as he shed the remnants of his t-shirt. I fixed my gaze on a nearby pine, studying the bark with exaggerated intensity. It won't take long, he said, voice deepening, already hovering in that eerie space between human and animal. Then the sounds began, bones cracking and realigning, wet sliding of reshaping muscle, guttural moans that twisted my stomach. When silence fell, I dared a glance over my shoulder. Where Kael the man had stood, Kael the wolf now waited. Golden eyes unchanged, fur blacker, more lustrous stance, larger, more commanding. Perhaps it was my new understanding, no longer a wounded animal, but a being who chose this form. He padded toward me, nudging my hand with his muzzle. Intimacy struck me, knowing consciousness fully pulsed behind those eyes. Fully human in awareness. What now? I whispered, voice fragile in the vast forest. Kael stepped back, then looked at me expectantly. When I didn't move, he gently took the edge of my jacket in his teeth, tugging me closer. You want me to ride on your back? I asked, incredulous. He dipped his head in what I could only interpret as a nod. "Is that even possible? I'm not small," I murmured. He gave a look so unimpressed that a laugh nearly escaped despite my nerves. Another nudge more insistent left me no choice. All right, I muttered, approaching cautiously. Before I could finish, he lowered himself to the ground, clear in intent. Taking a deep breath, I straddled him carefully, fingers threading through thick fur at his shoulders. "Like this," I whispered. He rose smoothly, adjusting to my weight. I gasped, gripping instinctively, as power rolled beneath me. A few experimental steps, then he began to move. Walk became a loping run, forest floor, vanishing beneath us. I clung, learning to move with him, world blurring into green and brown streaks. Branches bent and logs leapt beneath us with supernatural grace. Terror melted into exhilaration. Wind whipped my hair back, carrying pine and earth. Sunlight speckled his dark fur, shifting as we ran. For the first time in years, every sense burned alive with impossibility. Hours passed, Kyle maintaining a pace beyond any natural wolf. Occasionally he slowed, nose to the wind, ears cocked. I slid off to stretch legs, careful not to stray from his side. By late afternoon, terrain changed, steeper, rocky, signaling true mountain ascent. Kyle moved with confidence as if home. During a brief pause, I offered him water from my bottle. He lapped gratefully. Golden eyes locked on mine. "Are we close?" I asked, knowing words could not elicit a reply. He exhaled softly, gesturing with his muzzle toward the looming peak. "Not yet. But we're making progress." As twilight settled, he led us to a shallow cave in the mountainside. Dry, defensible, sheltered. He gestured for me to enter first, then positioned himself at the entrance. The air cooled sharply. I shivered, pulling an extra layer from my backpack. Kyle's eyes followed me. Then to my surprise, he curled his warm body around me as I sat against the cave wall. "Oh," I breathed, softly, startled by the intimacy. "Thank you." I told myself it was nothing more than the practical warmth of his body pressed against mine. Yet I couldn't deny the comfort that seeped through me, the steady rhythm of Kyle's breathing, the solid weight of him curled at my side. Even amid the strangeness of it all, I felt safer than I had in years. Darkness settled fully over the forest when Kyle's ears pricked sharply, his body tensing. A low growl rumbled in his chest, barely audible, yet unmistakable in warning. "What is it?" I whispered, fear snapping back into my chest. "Hunters." Kyle rose gracefully to his feet and moved to the cave's mouth. I followed, sticking close as he scanned the shadows beyond. We froze for several long moments, his focus locked on something invisible to me. Then it came, a haunting, echoing howl from the forest. Kyle's posture softened immediately. He nudged my hand reassuringly. A second howl answered the first, then a third, forming a spectral chorus across the mountains. To my astonishment, Kyle lifted his head, an answered voice rising to meet theirs, sending shivers down my spine. "Your pack!" I breathed, realization dawning. He dipped his head in confirmation, then gestured for me to stay put, patting the ground a few yards from the cave entrance. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Wolves. No shifters. They moved with silent precision into the clearing. Even to my untrained eyes, they were extraordinary, larger than normal wolves' postures, charged with intelligence. They approached Kyle carefully, exchanging quiet vocalizations, communicating in ways I could not fully comprehend. I stayed inside the cave, heart hammering, as the reunion unfolded. After several minutes of tense interaction, Kyle turned, beckoning me forward with a subtle tilt of his head. "You want me to come out there?" I asked, nerves taut. His golden eyes held mine, patient and steady. Swallowing my fear, I stepped from the cave into the moonlight, facing the 4 shifters. They studied me with varying degrees of curiosity and caution. The largest, a gray wolf with a scarred muzzle, approached first, circling me while I stood frozen. unsure what to do. Kyle remained beside me, body alert, but calm. The gray wolf finished its inspection, then looked to Kyle with an expression that read disbelief, even in lupine form. A reddish-brown female approached next, sniffing my clothes, my hair, my outstretched hand. Hello," I muttered awkwardly, aware of how absurd it sounded to speak aloud to creatures as intelligent as humans. "I take it you're Kyle's companions," I guessed. A soft sound escaped the red wolf amusement, perhaps before she retreated to the others. The third wolf, younger, mottled gray and black, seemed openly curious, tilting its head playfully. Kale pressed close to my leg, protective. The gray wolf, likely the alpha Kale had spoken of, barked sharply, commanding. The younger wolf vanished into the trees with incredible speed. "What's happening?" I whispered to Kyle, though I knew he couldn't respond in this form. The red female returned, carrying a bundle of fabric in her mouth. She dropped it at my feet. I bent to retrieve it, realizing it was clothing, a simple shirt and pants, clearly for Kyle. "You're going to shift back?" I asked. Kyle nodded, then looked pointedly toward the cave. I understood and retreated inside, giving him privacy. From the cave entrance, I glimpsed the others forming a protective circle, attention, outward standing guard. Minutes later, Kyle appeared, dressed in the clothes his packmates had provided. Hair tousled, expression weary but alert. "They've been searching for me since I disappeared," he said plainly. "When they sensed my shift this morning, they changed course to intercept us. That's good, right?" I asked, relief, mingled with anxiety at the presence of more shifters, more protection. Kyle's expression remained serious. "They bring news. Varric's hunters have split their forces. Some are still tracking my original trail. But others—" He hesitated. Others were headed toward your cabin when my pack picked up their scent." Cold fear ran through me. "My cabin? Why there if they're tracking you?" "They know what you are to me now," Kyle said softly. "Taking a mate is the surest way to lure us into a trap." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. How could they possibly know I hadn't even realized until yesterday? Kale ran a hand through his dark hair, worry creasing his brow. "There are ways," he said quietly, guiding me back to sit against the cave wall. "Old magic. It can detect the forming of mate bonds. That's how Varric's family has hunted my kind for generations," he continued. "They seek those with potential for such connections, using them as bait. You were marked before we even met." The realization hit me like a wave dizziness, making my knees weak. "Before we even met?" "Not exactly." Kyle corrected, calm but deliberate. "The potential was dormant. When you helped me, it began activating. And when I shifted this morning, it would have sent a pulse that those attuned to such things could detect." A massive gray wolf appeared at the cave entrance, blocking much of the moonlight. He fixed Kale with an intense stare. "Riven says we need to move," Kale translated softly. "Hunter activity detected less than 10 miles south." "Riven," I echoed, eyes widening at the imposing wolf. The alpha Kale confirmed. "He's led our pack for over a century. If anyone can get us safely to our territory, it's him." A red-furred female joined Riven at the entrance, her gaze sharp, appraising me with unnerving precision. "That's Lyra," Kale said. "Our best tracker. And the younger one is Tay. Newest to the pack but fiercely loyal," Kale added. My mind reeled. These wolves were people. Individuals with histories, names, personalities. Humans in wolf form, just like Kale. "Why don't they shift?" I asked. "Wouldn't it be safer to stay in wolf form while we're exposed?" "A human scent travels farther," Kyle explained. "And we're less conspicuous if hikers or hunters pass by. Riven prefers this form, keeps his mind sharper." Riven made a sound that might have been agreement before turning, signaling us to follow. Kyle helped me to my feet, lingering slightly longer than necessary. "We'll travel through the night," he said. My pack knows these mountains intimately. Every cave, every hidden pass. By dawn, we should reach the outer edges of your territory. Then what I asked, shouldering my backpack. Kale's golden eyes softened. Then you'll see the home I've been trying to reach for a month. A place where my kind has lived in secret for centuries. We set out, the 4 wolves forming a protective formation around me, Riven, and Lyra, taking point Kyle at my side and Finn bringing up the rear. The darkness that should have been impenetrable posed no obstacle. They moved with confident precision. Terrain shifting beneath us, and I stumbled despite careful steps. After nearly an hour, Kyle stopped concern, etching his features. "This isn't working," he said. "You can't see well enough, and we're making too much noise." Before I could respond, he pulled his borrowed shirt over his head. "I need to shift again." "You'll ride as before, take your clothes." Embarrassed by the practicality of his dual nature, I began to hand over my backpack. "Finn will carry them," Kale said, unlacing his simple shoes. "It's more important we move quickly. The hunters are too close." I turned, hearing the familiar sounds of transformation behind me. When I glanced back, Kyle the wolf waited, golden eyes reflecting moonlight. Riven made a sound that almost seemed like approval, then led the way, expecting us to follow. Riding on Kale's back through the night forest was even more surreal than daylight. Shadows and silver patches of moonlight were all that marked the world, the warmth of his body and the rhythm of his muscles beneath me, the only constants. The other wolves flitted alongside, disappearing and reappearing like phantoms, moving with a coordination born of years hunting together. We traveled for hours, the mountains growing steeper, more rugged. When I thought I couldn't endure the cold any longer, Riven guided us into a narrow pass between towering rock faces. The path twisted upward, forcing me to slide from Kyle's back, using both hands and feet to climb. Near the summit, Riven froze, head raised, scenting the air. The other wolves tightened around me, low growls rumbling from Riven. Kyle nudged me toward a narrow crevice in the rock. Hide, his gesture clearly commanded. I squeezed into the space, heart hammering as the wolves assumed defensive positions. For several agonizing minutes, nothing stirred. Then carried on, the night breeze, came voices, human voices, low and urgent. From my hiding spot, I caught fragments. "Definitely pass this way. Silver only. Take the girl alive if possible." The crunch of boots on rocky ground drew closer. I pressed deeper into the crevice, barely daring to breathe. Through a gap in the rocks, I saw Riven signal to Lyra and Tay, who melted into the shadows on either side of the path. What happened next moved faster than my human eyes could follow. The first hunter rounded the bend. Riven launched from his perch like a silent shadow, colliding with the man before he could raise his weapon. Simultaneously, Lyra struck from the opposite side, teeth clamping the second hunter's arm with surgical precision. Kyle stayed near me, coiled with tension, ready to defend if any threat breached their assault. Through my narrow view, I saw Riven pin the first hunter to the ground, jaws inches from his throat. The hunter laughed, a cold, unnatural sound echoing off the rocks. "You won't kill me, beast," he sneered. "Not while we have your people." Riven froze for a fraction of a second, enough for the hunter beneath him to twist and press a small device against the wolf's side. A flash of blue light erupted, accompanied by a piercing, high-pitched sound that made my teeth ache. "No," I gasped, voice escaping before I could stop it. The hunter's gaze found mine. A slow, terrible smile spread across his face. "There you are," he murmured. "The mate." Kale exploded into motion, placing himself between the hunter and my hiding spot, a snarl shaking the mountain air. The hunter lifted the device, but Kale struck, knocking him forward. The device skidded across the rocks, coming to rest at the edge of the path. Lyra had subdued the second hunter, but a third emerged further down the pass, gun raised. A single shot shattered the night. The bullet struck rock inches from Tay, struggling with the first hunter. Everything slowed. Kale hesitated, torn between guarding me and aiding his packmates. I saw Riven rise unsteadily, still dazed from the device, and the third hunter taking aim now directly at Kyle. Instinctively, I lunged from my hiding spot, snatching the fallen device. My fingers closed around it just as the hunter fired again. The bullet ricocheted off the rock sparks flying. The device was a small metal cylinder with a button at one end. Acting on pure instinct, I pressed it. Blue light erupted, that same agonizing high-pitched sound ringing in the night. The hunter dropped his weapon, clutching his head, collapsing to his knees. The effect on him was less severe than on Riven, but still debilitating. "Kyle," I shouted. Understanding flashed in his golden eyes. Renewed, he charged the first hunter who scrambled for a weapon. Following Kyle's lead, Tay went after the second man, freed from Lyra's grip. I kept the device trained on the third hunter, preventing recovery. Riven regained footing, joining the fight. His massive jaws clamped the first hunter's arm with a sickening crunch. The skirmish ended as abruptly as it began. The hunters, outmatched, retreated down the pass, one half carrying their injured companion. The lead hunter's cold smile lingered in my mind. When silence returned, Kyle came to my side, checking for injuries. I was shaking the device still in my hand. "I'm okay," I reassured him, voice trembling. "What was that?" "What did I just do?" I whispered. Riven approached, respect in his posture. He nudged the device with his nose, then looked at Kyle meaningfully. "It's a sonic disruptor," Kyle explained, "designed to target our enhanced senses." The fact it affected the hunters too suggested augmentation. "They have your people," I murmured. Kyle exchanged a silent look with Riven. Communication passed wordlessly between them. "We've had members of our pack go missing over the past year," he admitted. "We always feared they were dead," Kyle said, voice low. "But if Varric is holding them alive..." The weight of that possibility pressed between us like a storm cloud gathering. Riven gave a sharp bark, a command. No hesitation this time. We pushed forward through the night with renewed urgency, any trace of caution replaced by grim purpose. The encounter with the hunters had stripped away whatever illusion of safety we still carried. By the time pale dawn cracked over the ridge, we'd passed through the narrow mountain corridor and descended into a hidden valley, high in the Rockies. The moment sunlight spilled across the valley floor, I stopped, breath caught in my chest. Tucked among towering pines and ancient stones sat cabins and great timber lodges, built so organically into the mountain that from above they might as well have been shadows and bark. Smoke curled from stone chimneys. Figures moved through the clearing, some on 2 legs, some on 4. "Welcome to Wolf Haven," Kale murmured beside me, having shifted back into his human form and tugged on the spare clothes Tay carried. "Our home for nearly 3 centuries. As we stepped deeper into the valley, heads turned. Voices traveled. The crowd formed fast wolves, shifting into people, mid-stride, clothes tossed to them by others. Faces filled with shock, curiosity, suspicion. Then the crowd parted for an elderly woman. Silver hair braided down her back, posture straight as a blade, eyes bright gold just like Kyle's. Despite her age, she moved like a mountain wind, sure, powerful, unbroken. "Kyle," she breathed, voice trembling as she wrapped her arms around him. "We feared you lost." "Grandmother," he murmured, holding her tight before turning to gesture toward me. "This is the woman who saved me, my mate." The word rippled through the gathered pack like thunder murmurs, rising some startled, some reverent, some wary. The elder's gaze snapped to me. When her eyes landed on mine, they widened not in disbelief, but in recognition. "A human mate," she whispered, wonder thick in her tone. "After all these lifetimes." She stepped forward and clasped my hands in hers, warm, firm, ancient. "Child," she said, gently searching my face with piercing wisdom. "Do you understand what you've stepped into? What it means to be bound to one of us?" I swallowed, spine straightening as some new resilience settled inside me, stronger than fear. "Not fully," I answered truthfully. "But I'm learning, and I'm here." Her expression softened. pride, sorrow, hope all woven together. That she said voice, warm as sunlight, breaking snow is a better beginning than most ever get.